Okay, hello everybody. This is Soraya from The Purposeful Professional. I'm back with another very purposeful professional and person. I'd like to introduce to you all to the podcast, Christa Stephens. She is a great marketer, brander, serial entrepreneur, all these amazing and great things. And I'm excited to really get into her journey during this call. So Christa, please introduce yourself to the listeners.
Hey everyone, my name is Christa, and it is wonderful to meet you guys over the airways, and I am excited to be here.
Yeah, super excited to have you. I think Krista's like an amazing marketer that I encountered through. I think it's Forbes Black. I don't know where I first encountered you, but I think like the work that you do is amazing, and I also want you to contract for some of my ventures. We're still kind of working on that. But I think it's great to see someone with such a diverse skill set, as well as a woman of color that has boldly taken up the mantle of entrepreneurship. I always am fascinated by entrepreneurs before me because I think it definitely wasn't easy. Now it's a bit easier to become a founder now with like AI and all these things, but it was much harder back then too. So it's hard. It's just hard. Entrepreneurship is just hard, and I tell people that all the time. So I'm always excited to interview those who have succeeded and persisted past some of the barriers. So speaking of those barriers, one of the segments that we do on Purposeful Professional is called Pop Purposed, and we like to talk about pop culture topics, and we choose pop culture topics that are relevant to each guest's background. So when I thought of you, I began thinking about the Fearless Fund situation and what's happening with Fearless Fund. So one of the things that is happening with the Fearless Fund is they actually got basically lumped in with the affirmative action case and suit. The same man that basically went up to the Supreme Court and said, you know, race-based admissions is unconstitutional and won. He actually went against Fearless Fund as well. So there's been a lot of controversy around is funding women of color entrepreneurs considered, can that be considered racist? Can that be considered discriminatory? So we had a Times article that we're referencing, but I also wanted to ask you to help me with talking about this because I think you'd be a great thought partner in this. So I wanted to tell the audience that for our pop culture segment, we'll be answering the following questions on the Fearless Fund and their controversy surrounding the Supreme Court's affirmative action verdict and the subsequent case against them. So my first question for you is, do you think the attacks on the Fearless Fund are legitimate or justified? Why or why not?
That is a really good question. Hmm, I want to say that one, a lot of times when I'm an entrepreneur, I'm looking for spaces just like the Fearless Fund to be really honest, vulnerable, and transparent. There's a lot of times where I'm trying to find funding for my business, for my clients, and I'm coming up short. It was really difficult during the pandemic to start my business. I had $300 to start my business. I am a wife, I am a mom, and I am from Detroit. And not to say that those are marks against me, but it is difficult to start my business. And there is, people out here like, Miss Simone that is, doing the work of saying, hey, we have, these resources. And then to see that, her being a pioneer, get this amazing, thing that she's doing taken away from all of us, it sucks. It's hurtful. And we don't have that many safe spaces. So, reading that article, seeing what she's going through, seeing what we're going through as a community, it sucks. It's gut wrenching. So I'm at a loss for words, to be honest. And it really, it just sucks. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think that's how I feel. That is how I feel about it. You know, I have to do the journalist thing and ask what you think about it, but I could tell that you think what I think. You know, we think the same thing. You know, I just think it's number one, like y'all are going against Fearless Fund. We need 1,000 Fearless Funds. In
Yeah.
fact, we need a Fearless Fund in each major city. We don't have that yet. So for every Fearless Fund and Black Girl Ventures, there are thousands of organizations that deny Black founders, specifically Black women founders, access to the capital to start. We have entire systems that reproduce inequities and that honestly produce a situation where it is almost impossible for many people to start and or even gain investment to sustain right what they are creating, what they're working on. So I really do admire the work of the Fearless Fund. I don't think it's justified. I think they're being, kind of like siphoned up into this larger situation and this larger conversation about what does it look like to fund intersectionally, and is that discrimination? And I'm a DEI practitioner, so I know it's not discrimination, it's equity. It's looking for those who don't have, and it's making sure that they do have. But in certain spaces, there's been this, if it's not, if all people aren't invited, right, we're discriminating. But we're not seeing it as that. We're seeing it as we're looking for those that need, and we're going to those that need. So in that case, it is not justified at all. So I definitely agree with you about how heart-wrenching it is, how terrible it is to see this work be under fire. But I also do think optimistically, so many people are standing with Fearless Fund that I know that they will get their just due. So I'm not afraid, because I do see the support and the outpouring that they have. So you talked a little bit about your own journey. And I think like this is a podcast where we talk about the people, your career, and the culture. We talk a lot about like all the intersectional layers and factors that affect how we show up at work, or how we show up as entrepreneurs, right? So how has your own entrepreneurial journey been impacted by your identity as a woman of color?
Mm. Um, I would definitely say it's been a journey. I started my entrepreneurial journey since I being 14. I'm 36 now,
Mm,
and my first impact with being a Black woman, with starting this journey being 14, was in the library. To be honest, I went to Persian High School here in Detroit, and it was two librarians who was like, "Hey, you got too much time on your hands."
mhm,
and they was like, "Hey, why don't you learn how to do taxes?" And that was honestly my first entryway into entrepreneurship. So with that, I just said, okay, let me learn more and more about what the journey is of being an entrepreneur, what how this actually is working. And it was so many other Black women who actually embraced me into this journey too. So I
mhm.
was fortunate enough to find other mentors and things like that who looked like me in the community too. So it has been a journey, and it was lots of bumps along the way too. But thank God for the community that is here in Detroit too. So I'm so happy about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a saying that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to raise an entrepreneur as well. And I love the
Mhm.
fact that you talked about how your entrepreneurial beginnings were actually spearheaded by others. I hear that a lot, like hosting this podcast, like, oh, like it was somebody else that got me into it. But also the importance of having that network to birth and raise and also promote that interest. You're talking a lot about Detroit, and I can only imagine in that area, like being in those sort of areas. It's a metropolis. There's a city area, but there's always like there's vast disparities, there's different ways of living even within one major city. But within that, there's an opportunity as well to potentially close the gap, to potentially create something that makes life better for other people, or like the librarian told you, like do somebody's taxes.
Yep.
Because there's some people who don't have that. So it's great that you were able to see the opportunities in that background, because one of the things that I was thinking about the other day is that there's opportunity everywhere. We have to open our eyes to see it. Even in the Midwest, which y'all might not think, well, we're not the East, but we're not the West, but there's still opportunity there's still opportunity there. So it's great that you were able to find those opportunities on the ground. So I also want to know, like, what tips might you have for entrepreneurs that might have heard, like, hey, Fearless Fund is, they have this case going on, they have a situation going on. What tips might you have for entrepreneurs who are like that, who are thinking about that, but they might be discouraged? What tips do you have to help them to find the resilience and encourage them to keep going?
Mm. Um, I would say honestly, keep moving. So, I saw in the article that, she is fighting and it's been months, right? But she
Mm,
still has support from other people. So she's still garnering support online. She's still garnering support in person and networking events. So, similar to the journey of a bumpy road for entrepreneurs, keep going. So there is grassroots support communities all over the place. So, if, there's one door that is shut in your face, that's okay. You can turn around and go that way. So, it's okay. You could definitely keep going and definitely find a support system as you are going, because you're not by yourself in this. Even though sometimes you feel like you're by yourself, it is definitely somebody there that can help you out. And if it's not in person, it's online, just like how me and you met.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's not in person, it's online. There's so many things that are I feel like we're existing in an ecosystem now that is not only national but international. And there's
Mhm,
so much support that you can receive. I mean, I've met people who have like put me onto like grants newsletters where I was able to get grants from. Like there's so much support that can be received and there's so many different forms of support. So I love the fact that you're speaking to us, number one, finding support where we can find it, right? Like finding the community where we find it. And then number two, making sure that we operate in spaces that can help us to get what we need. I always say what you said, like if they shut the door, I'm coming through the window. I literally tell
okay.
but I was going to do a talk on LinkedIn with another entrepreneur that I know, and we were going to entitle that talk "Get in the Room"
Mhm,
because we know how important it is to just get in and stand in, even if we don't feel qualified. Like get in the room, stand in the room, and I think that's what you're really exemplifying. Like get in the spaces that are created to serve you. I could think of so many like small business associations around the country. There's so many women in enterprise associations. I met with someone who runs one in Massachusetts like a couple months back. Like
mhm,
there's so many agencies and spaces. Get into these spaces and ask for help. I think there's the boldness in asking for help.
mhm,
And once you ask for it, wait until you receive it. Go through the window, go through the front door, go through the back door, wherever you have to go to get into the space and get into the room where the resources are, like do that. So I really love your encouragement. And I think that aligns with exactly with what I would say.
mhm.
100%. So, of course,
Yeah.
for our last question, we know that the Fearless Fund specifically serves Black women. And while that has been a point of controversy, I actually think that's a point of strength. I think it's a strength for them to know this is our target demographic. This is who we want to serve. This is the community that we believe needs the resources that we can provide. Not that other communities don't need resources, but this is the community that we feel most vested in and that we think funding will make an impact. So, given that Fearless Fund is under fire, I know they're going to be okay. But I also want to ask you, like, how do you think that Black women in entrepreneurship and leadership can remain resilient throughout the unique challenges that we face due to our identities?
Mm, that's such a good question. Thinking about that, I always go back to this quote that Denzel Washington said. He's one of my favorite actors, by the way. He was asked about why have a black director direct a movie, and he said because of cultural differences.
Mm,
We know what it's like for a hot comb to go on our hair and smell of grease, right? We know what that feels like. We know when we're in a space what these different feelings are like. So what I think about when we're trying to go into these different spaces, when we're trying to go get specific funds for our businesses, sometimes it's really hard to ask for help. I still
mm,
struggle with asking for help, and I've been doing business for years, right? So when I go to different people who look just like me, I know sometimes what to specifically say, what to ask, or sometimes I don't know what to ask. And I know sometimes when I look at somebody that looks just like me, another black woman, they'll be like, it's okay, I understand. It's okay, you know? And so funds like this, what Miss Simone has created, I love, some of the different things when I see, even on the Instagram, on the Facebook and stuff like that. It's extremely helpful because I'm like, okay, I can resonate with this. This is specifically for me, right?
yeah.
So I know that this is a space for me. So I'm looking for things that are created for me. It's extremely helpful. So I know that they're going to be okay because there are other things that are going to consistently be created for us so that we can step into those spaces so that we are having safe spaces. um because it's helpful for us to have things for us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah,
very helpful. It's very helpful for us. And that goes back to what we're talking about at the beginning of
yeah.
this conversation, which is equity. Like that is
Hmm.
equity. making sure
Mhm.
that there are specific spaces for specific identities. And it's not discrimination. It's
Mhm.
making sure that we account for the difference with specificity. That's kind of how I see it. We
Yeah.
have to account for the generational differences. We have to account for the socioeconomic, systemic differences by making sure that there are spaces preserved for certain populations. And I think that that is not only the future, but that's the now. And I think that everyone else needs to adjust and get with the program, honestly. But I
Mhm.
love what you're saying about like understanding that when a space is for you, like that is something that will resonate deeply with you. I feel the same
Yes.
way. And when I see the gap in the market as an entrepreneur, I'm like, okay, let me see if I can do something. And
Yes.
that's exactly why I decided to work on the project I'm working now. The podcast, we'll hear about it later, because I began to realize while we do have a lot of resources for women of color entrepreneurs, we don't have those specifically focused on 18 to 40. And also, like, we don't have certain things. Like, we don't have that mentorship on the widespread scale that we can. It was hard for me to even find mentors when I started out. It was hard in general, it was difficult in general. So I think I try to take my experience and my pain, I always say, and make it my purpose. And I think that's
Mm.
exactly what Ari and Simone is doing. That's exactly what they're doing at Fearless Fund. So for that reason alone, I think their resilience needs to be our resilience and a collective resilience. And we all need to figure out what we can do.
Mhm.
Um, that Denzel quote, that stuck with me because I remember seeing that and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
like this is a Black History Month moment.
Okay.
I remember seeing that and being like, yes, this is a Black History Month moment. But that Denzel quote stuck with me because, like, if we understand what it's like to have the hot comb in the grease, if we understand each other, we need to be able to make a way for each other as well
Mhm.
and use that understanding to create opportunity and space. So I love that. All
Mhm.
right. So that was a great pop purpose segment. Thank you, Krista, for flowing with me through the
Yeah.
Fearless Fun. And Fearless Fun, if you are listening, maybe you're not, maybe you are, we stand with you. And
Yeah.
we know that everything will be okay. I'm confident that everything will go well for
Mhm.
you all. All right. And those who are mad are going to stay mad. Okay. So we want to get into who you are as a person. Let's go through the people segment where we discuss your personal background and some of the more things that make us human. I think like when I
Mhm.
started Purpose So Professional, I wanted to have human centered conversations about career. And no, I was like, we always talk about like how can I get this job? How can I get that job? But I really want to start with who the person is as a person. Because sometimes I think we're not given that ability to show up as we really are in professional spaces. So my first question for you for this section is when you hear your name, Christa Stephens, like what are the first words that come to mind for you when you hear your own name?
So what's funny is that I don't hear my name often. I hear mom often. So when I do hear it, it's like, oh, creative for me because I've done
Mhm.
so many things.
Yeah.
So it's either mom or creative. So that's those are two things for me. So I've done so many things in life. And I can pick and choose and say, okay, this is the direction that I'm going in, and so that's what I hear. And so the cool thing is I even have creative on my necklace now as a
Mm.
reminder. It's like my North Pole, or my direction. Like this is who I am. So yeah, yeah.
I see that because I feel like as a marketer and a brander, you're probably so used to hearing other brand names and making that association. But one of the most powerful like revelations of 2024 for me has been that we all have a brand, even if we don't think we
Mhm.
do. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like a strategic brand of, I'm doing this at that moment or I'm posting this at that moment. It's more so who we are and the essence of who we are and how that's communicated to other people. Like, I think like that Maya Angelou quote, people think it's trite, but it's true. Like, people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that
Yes.
I always think the brand is in the feeling that we get, not only when we hear our own name, but when we hear the names of others. So I wanted to give you that moment. And yeah, mom,
Mhm.
that's a title. No, that is the title, right? I think that's one of like
Mhm.
the best. That's one of the biggest things. If anything, that's the biggest job a woman can have. Period.
Mhm.
Being a mother, so that is the ultimate title I think a woman can receive. But also, like you talked about creative, and you talked about like all the things that you've done. So tell me, like how creativity has played a role in your career and your life. Were you always creative? Did you always know you were creative? How has that played a role?
Yeah, so I honestly didn't know that I was always creative. So
Mhm.
creativity for me has been transformative. So when I was younger, I honestly wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
So I started out when I was in kindergarten wanting to be a doctor. I was like steadfast, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And as I was going throughout my career, I was like, not so much. So I kind of started transitioning, thinking about, okay, how else can I help people? I knew that that was at my core, wanting to help other people transform their lives, but not really knowing exactly what that looks like. So as I started to go through high school and going through college, realizing that maybe, a doctor wasn't it, then thinking about marine biology, I started to, go into do this thing called green fluorescent proteins, transforming the DNA of plants and stuff like that. That was really cool. And I was like, okay, this ain't it either. So I started doing lots of different things. And I eventually landed on geology with chemical manufacturing. And then I did some yoga for some time, then software development. And then I'm here. So I would definitely say that kind of tying it back to when I hear my name, transformation, creativity, and momming it up.
Yeah, no, but that's real. That's real though. And I love the fact that you've been able to be vulnerable and talk about like how you have had you've pursued multiple paths. Cause I always
Mhm,
hear people like, especially when they become entrepreneurs, it's like, oh, well, I've always been an entrepreneur. And okay, like I kind of like nerd out over careers. I rarely meet someone who has always been an entrepreneur or always wanted to be an entrepreneur.
mhm,
I feel like I have this theory now where I'm like, I think entrepreneurship chose a lot of people, but I think a
mhm.
lot of people went through the transition of going to different things. So I'm hearing marine biology. I'm hearing, like, I'm not only hearing creativity, but I'm hearing it in terms of science, like your love of science, your love of the earth and the world. So I think that's a wonderful thing. And like you said, when you hear your name, it's transformation. It's like it's you being a transformative person. And I remember like even when I was in the room, like typing up these questions, I was like, Krista makes me feel like I'm not an alien. because no, because I feel like we are similar in that like I went through my evolution of like I want to do this or that or that. And even now I'm a multi hyphenate person, which a lot of people have an issue with.
Yes.
Like, you know, are you really all of these things or can you really be all of these things? And what I tell people is you can, not all at the same time though, but you can
Mhm.
make room for a rich and fulfilling career in life. So I think that that's something that when I think of you, I think of that. And even when I was doing your questions and like setting up this episode, I started thinking about that. And I started thinking about the different facets of you and your personality. And yes, we're going to get into every single career that you've had. So those questions are coming up. But because you're a creative person, I wanted to give you a creative question. I didn't want you
Mhm.
to introduce yourself to us in terms of your story in a very trite way. I was like, okay, I need to step up my creativity for Krista. So I want you to think of your life as a movie. We've
Oh,
talked about momming it up. We've talked about transformation. We've
mhm,
talked about creativity. But I want you to think about your life as a movie. So if you could summarize your life into a movie genre,
mhm.
right? What type of movie would it be and why? And then part two is given your choice in genre, what would be the most significant events or themes you'd like to highlight within this movie?
So I would say it would be maybe like a comedy, drama, psychological thriller type of thing. So my all-time favorite movie is Everything Everywhere All at Once, and then
Oh,
Doctor Strange. So like it would be one of those types of things. And if I had to sum it up to maybe one of the scenes would be when oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name in the movie with Everything Everywhere All at Once. But when she was flashing through what was happening in her life as she transitioned through the multiverse, that would be me with all of the different things I do. So, favorite genre, comedy drama, because on the side, people tell me I'm funny with just the way that I speak. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that was funny, but let's go with
yeah.
it.
Okay. Let me tell you, I love that because I was like, okay, I'm gonna get this creative question out. No, I love that. I think that that speaks to like not only your creativity but also your multifacetedness. Because like everywhere, everywhere, all at once is a movie of being everywhere, everywhere, all at once. And like you said, they transcend into different universes and stuff. So I think like that's showing me how mentally flexible you are. That you can imagine yourself in different universes and different positions. And I think that's why you've had such a rich and multifaceted career. You've been able to actually see yourself within different spaces and actually like yourself within different spaces because I think so many of us get attached to just being one thing and doing one thing. So I really do love that. I feel you with the comedy drama, psychological horror. Cause I think like life has all of those moments. Like life has moments of comedy, like where like moments of lightness and like, oh, like it's dope. Like this is happening to me. But
Yeah.
there's also elements of sadness. There's also elements of horror. Like, damn, this shouldn't be happening to me.
Okay.
Like there's so many elements. And I think that's cool that you, like I said, like that's cool that you embrace all of that and you embrace that complexity. I think that's really cool. And yeah, your multiple careers would be the highlight. Like that, yeah, your
Mhm.
multiple careers would be the highlight. Like I think that's cool. Like people do want to see different facets of people. So I think that's dope. And yeah, I can see why people think you're funny. Like we've had a lot of like just this episode, we've been laughing. So I can see that. And that's a crazy thing too. Like that's a cool thing too. So like you can add the comedy to the horror, you can add the dark to the light. Like I think these are the things that make life what it is. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So last but not least, right? We got to talk
Mhm.
about branding and personal branding. So
Mhm.
I've been thinking about personal branding a lot. And I think that topic comes up a lot on this podcast. Like who, not only who we are, but who we think we are. So I want to ask you, you developed this business, you've done all of these things. Like, what do you think is your personal brand and why?
Mhm. I would say my personal brand is ever changing. So,
Mm,
I with my brand, I make sure to leave breadcrumbs. And I want to I guess clarify that if you happen to just go and Google anything, you will see things from maybe when I was 12 years old on the internet because I'm been around since the internet. You'll probably see my MySpace page. You'll see my Black Planet page, all of these different things. So you will
mhm,
see me as I am developing, as I'm learning, as I'm growing, because that is a part of my history. So why should
mhm,
that, be a very polished version of me? Because I'm not a polished version. So,
mhm,
that is me. So that is my personal brand to continue to tell my story because that people will resonate with me and that's how I can continue as well. So with how AI is moving as well, I feel like that is extremely important for people to remember who they are, remember, the mistakes that they made, and then show, hey, I'm still human, right? Here's some of the stuff that happened in my past. It wasn't all good, it wasn't all bad, but hey, I'm here. Life ain't been no crystal stair, okay?
Yeah, no, let me tell you, what you're saying is facts, especially with AI. Like, there's so many, like, there's fake pages out there. Like, there's literally fake pages out
Yep.
there. And people are following influencers that don't even exist. So I
Yes.
think that authenticity that you're talking about as a marketer, like, that's what builds trust with the audience. And it doesn't always have to be polished. I heard you say Black Planet. I heard you say MySpace. I've heard you say Detroit. I've heard you say mom. And I think that now that I'm getting to know you through this conversation, these are all things that reflect upon your personal brand. Like these are all things that make you who you are. And
Mhm.
I really love that you took that you took that avenue with it, because I think that there's always this pressure to be inauthentic, especially in entrepreneurship. Like, have you ever felt that pressure to be or appear to be somebody that you're not, to impress people in the entrepreneurial space?
Oh my God, yes, all the time. So, going into different meetings, right? So, I want to take it back to when I worked in chemical manufacturing. I
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of times the only black face in all of these different things. Like, it was only me. And I was like 20 years old at the time, working with all of these different people. A lot of times, not knowing some of the different things, working with the Department of Homeland Security. Could you imagine being 20 years old? Working with the Department of Homeland Security, and you're coming in not knowing all of the things and someone's training you. So a lot of the times it was absolutely terrifying. So as I continue to maneuver, continue to learn things, I have to remember, what my roots are. I'm going to make mistakes. People around me are going to make mistakes. Give myself grace, right? So, I am losing the question along the way that you asked because I got excited.
No, it's fine.
But
I can repeat it for you.
yeah, but yeah, yeah. So what was the question that you asked
Yeah,
me?
no. So the question was,
The-
if we ever feel the pressure to be like inauthentic in
oh,
entrepreneurial spaces, or any spaces that we're in, and you did answer it. You talked a
yeah.
lot about like feeling as if we have to be a certain way or appeal to a certain way, especially when we're in places, positions, people who are people of power, right? Are they have their eyes on us. And I think like it's magnified by our identities. It's magnified by thinking if I don't present myself a certain way, are they automatically going to think I'm this stereotype? I think like that literally is the definition of stereotype threat, like feeling like you live under a microscope. So I wanted to ask you that because I
Mhm.
think like you've been able to show up very powerfully, very authentically. And I think as founders, we always think we have to always have it together. I mean, there have been times in my
Yeah.
own journey where I felt like if I admit weakness at all, like people aren't going to take me serious. And sometimes I think I have to have a chip on my shoulder because I am younger.
Yeah.
And I think like the encouragement that you're providing right now to just say, like, it doesn't always have to be perfect. You can mess up, you can stumble, but that's okay. I think that's what people need to hear. I think that's what people like me need to hear.
Mhm.
And we need to hear that it's okay to mess up because unfortunately, sometimes it feels like the world doesn't forgive us or hold space for us to mess up, you know?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So a lot of the times that as a founder, as a CEO, I do feel like it is pressure to be inauthentic. So when you have to do competitive analysis and then you see, hey, there's somebody else that's way over there that sometimes do it better than you, and you're like, okay, do I need to change up what I'm wearing? Do I need to change up my profiles? Do I need to do this so that I can be over there? But then you have to remember exactly what does success look like for you, where am I actually trying to go? And
Mm.
then remember what your North Star is. So a lot of the times that do happen for me, but then I have to, okay, go where are your KPIs? What am I trying to do? So that's what I have to do. And then, in the past, like I was saying before, it was lots of times when I was working before that I had to be like, oh, okay, I do have to change to meet some version of what professionalism is that is you know it was rough.
Yeah, I let me tell you, I know.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know. I know those jobs where like you're itching because of your stockings. I know.
yes.
And the shoes, okay, and the dress,
Oh my
and you
gosh,
gotta
yes.
have your hair a certain way. I know
Mhm.
those jobs and I know those spaces and I've been in those spaces and you feel like you can't even breathe in there.
Oh my
Can I
god.
say that? Like you feel
Yes.
like you can't even breathe in there. You feel like you can't even really breathe. Like it's like, oh, can I breathe after work? I'm breathing different. I'm
Yeah.
acting different. I'm thinking different. And those environments tend to constrict us. But I love what you said about understanding, like you're pointing to us understanding that our story is really what's going to attract people. And I think that as humans, we tend to underestimate. You talked about competitive analysis and KPIs, and those things matter, but
Mhm.
we tend to forget a lot of the time. And I think great marketers understand this. We are marketing to people.
Mhm.
So when we can appeal to the human side in someone,
Mhm.
when we can appeal to who they are, that will lead to the success of what we're doing. I had a huge like eureka moment when people were saying that my empathy was the reason why they wanted to work with me. It's like, oh, wait, what?
Mhm.
But I began to realize, like, okay, so it was me. Like, it was me. And one of my favorite founders, Rachel Rogers, she wrote this like How to Be a Millionaire book or something like that, or Your First Seven Figure Enterprise.
Mhm.
Um, she talked a lot about like you being the brand, like you being the thing that draws people. And I think that great entrepreneurs are the thing that draws people to their business. And it's not even about charisma or it's not about any of that. It's about how you show up, right? If
Mhm.
you show up as authentic, if you show up as messy, however messy it is, if that's who you are, people are going to remember you and you're going to stand out. And I think we do live in the age of the entrepreneur influencer. You know, people want to know the faces and the stories behind certain companies. And that makes people look out for the company more, even support the company more. So I agree with you that the story is powerful. Like now I know Christa, Detroit, mom, transformative. She's done all these careers that made me want to even work with you, you know? So I think like it's the storytelling. It's a storytelling aspect that I think is so strong. And that's what you were really hinting to in your answer, like making sure to own our story with whatever we do,
Yeah.
own our story and completely submerge ourselves within that story. So I think that's amazing. And I think that's what attracts people,
Yeah,
versus,
definitely.
you know?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into all these careers that you done listed. Um, we got to go from A to Z
Yeah.
with Krista. So you've worked many jobs from geologist and chemical manufacturing to yoga instruction.
Mhm.
Tell me the story behind each job, right? And I think I want to start from the top, and I want to start with the geology. So
Mhm.
why geology, and like what moved you to make this choice earlier in life?
So, geology was honestly, I failed some classes, to be honest. So when I got to college, it was a shock. I was an A student all through high school, all through elementary, middle school, got to college, and I was like, oh, okay, girl.
Oh,
It wasn't a good look for your girl here, okay? So when I got to college, it was a lot of bumpy roads in college, bumpy roads. And so, I had a come to Jesus moment. I was at work, and literally a woman came to work and she wore a Jesus shirt. And I was like, oh, this woman is very gorgeous. She had really big hair, and she came and she touched my hands and she said, Jesus told me to tell you. And I was like, oh, okay.
oh, oh, oh.
And she started praying with me and started speaking in tongues, like dead serious. I know this woman today, and she was like, Jesus told me to tell you that you need to change directions. And I was like, oh, wow. And so I just started walking, and I'm very spiritual, right? And so
Love
I
that.
was I was shaking. I was like, what is going on? So I don't remember all of the words that she was telling me at that moment, but she was speaking it like she was going. As I'm walking, I end up walking to my counselor's office. And I was like, hey, I want to make a change. She was like, have you thought about this? And, was telling me all about the different things. I just saw geology on a page. And I was like, I'm going to take this class. Took the
Mm,
class, and it was with this amazing professor. His name is Dr. Ed Van Hees. I still talk to him today. We are Facebook friends. He's a cool guy. And he was like, hey, rocks are cool. You can make makeup out of rocks. I was like, really? Started making makeup. Found someone.
yeah,
And it just kept going. I didn't know all of the different applications you can do with rocks. I literally have rocks on my desk right now. So
yeah.
yeah, so that's honestly how it started going. And with my career, with all of the different jobs, really someone, said something to me. I had a dream about something. I
Mm,
meditated, because I am deeply spiritual. So it was something
yeah,
that, shook me. And I was like, oh, okay, it's time to, do a 180, to do a 90. And that's honestly what happened. So with geology, somebody said, hey girl, you need to do this. I was like, all right, that's where we're going today.
you like shout out to the spirituality, because I think that's so important. And lately I've been hearing so many people say that they like what you're saying, they had a dream where they had a come to Jesus moment. So
Hmm.
you literally had a woman wearing
Hmm.
a Jesus shirt, right, pulling up to
Yep.
pray with you and then give you the word. And so I'm a Christian, that's what I identify as. And I can only imagine like how shook I would be like
Yeah.
not this woman bringing that message to God that I need to change past. I would have immediately like shifted, because I know like whenever you are, and we don't talk about this enough, but whenever you're spiritually aligned,
Hmm.
it's different. You feel
Yeah.
different. The how would I say this? The work ethic you have is different. Your
Mhm.
vision and perception is different. And I think like it's so funny that I hear so many people say they got a word on this, or, in the Christian space, we're like, oh, I got a word. But
Mhm.
in other spaces, you meditated or you visioned or you had a dream. And I think like it's so powerful that the spiritual world is a huge aspect, and it impacts how we see the physical world. And if we are connected and tapped into that, like you said, you're tapped into that, you were able to see geology, like you were just attracted to it. You were just
Mhm.
attracted to it, and you went in that direction, and it was an amazing class. And I can relate to that, like coming into college and thinking you want to study this, and then realizing, oh, well, this really ain't
Yep.
it. This is not it. Like this ain't really my thing. But you were able to heed to that direction and that instruction. And I actually have similar stories. I might have to do a whole episode just on that. I
Mhm.
have similar stories of literally like, I don't want to say God's provision, but like, yes, God's provision, and God using people to speak with me and pray with me to tell me certain things. And I'm big on like, I was raised in the Christian church. So literally every single word that I've received, every single prophetic word I've received, I've written down.
Mhm.
And when I saw my life begin to align, I wasn't even forcing myself to do that. But when I saw my life beginning to align with that, that was crazy. I received years ago a prophetic word that my career would be unique, it would be different. And I was like, what does this pastor mean by that? And literally now when I look at what I'm doing, doing something very different. I do very different things, and I've charted my own path and my own course. And he told me the exact word he said is, he said, God told me to tell you that your purpose is unique and you are for yourself. I didn't know he meant that I would work for myself. Right. So I think, like, and he told me that years ago, like when I was in college. So I think I stand on these things and I understand what you're saying, because I've had those same experiences. And I think it's so powerful when our spirituality can be the gateway to us finding our path or finding our purpose, because we all are here for a divine purpose, and there's some reason that we are supposed to be here. So thank you for that. That was a story upon stories. So I know that you went into chemical manufacturing as well. So, like, what made that a great pivot from geology for you at the time?
Well, honestly, again, I saw it on the geology wall. I was getting ready to get close to graduating, and everyone else was like, I'm going into mining, I'm going into, doing geological course and stuff like that. And I was like, I want a desk job. I'm a girly girl. So what can I do that is not doing all of those different things? We went into a mine in one of our geology trips, and I was like, this is fun, but I ain't doing this every day. What can I do that is not that? So I have always been a planeteer, like save the cheerleader, save the world. So how can I still save our communities? I realized that being in the chemical manufacturer, that throughout Detroit, there are many different chemical manufacturers here, and people don't know that. Where there's honestly just barrels of formaldehyde, cyanide, hexchrome, all of these different things that's literally in our neighborhood, and people don't know that. And if something were to happen, you have to evacuate for 5 miles. There are multiple factories here and people don't know. So I was like, okay, how can I align myself here to make sure that the people that are working in the plants are safe, as well as the people that are outside the plants are safe? So I started applying. I started, getting interviews, and then I started working there. And it was fun for some time because I was able to start helping the people in the plants, keeping them safe, teaching them about the pH scale, doing reports for the EPA, the Department of Homeland Security, all of those cool things. But then I realized the gravity of the situation. I was like, oh, if something blows up, I'm gonna get in trouble and everybody else is gonna be blown up too. So this is really scary. Like, I didn't realize, because I was 20, how serious this stuff was. So we were working with cancer causing materials. We were working with all different types of things. And I wanted to start a family. I was like, this is super serious. There was something called cradle to the grave, that if sign off on different types of materials, you would actually be responsible for that stuff for the rest of your life. I was like, I am 20. Yikes. So that didn't last too long at all. I was like, okay, let's get out of this. The money and the pay was really, really great, but my conscience was not okay with that. I was like, this isn't for me, and I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. So it led me to be in yoga and to really, get grounded into my spirituality and figure out how to help my community in a different way. So I started, getting my yoga certification, and I started teaching yoga online. I was like, okay, I really like this. This is amazing. And I had to figure out how to actually promote being a yoga instructor. And that's what really led me into being a digital marketer from there, because I had to build a website. I had to, do all the flyers and stuff like that. I was like, oh, I've been doing this since MySpace, since Black Planet, since all of these different things. So I went into software development because I had already knew how to do HTML, CSS, all that stuff, because I had been doing it since the internet came out. Just got professional certifications for it. And I was like, all right. So that's essentially how I got to where I am now. I just started building certifications, and I got about a book of them that I pull out when I need to display it for, different things and stuff. So it's been a journey.
I was gonna say, because I was gonna say, like, how the yoga. My next question was actually like, where did the yoga come through, right? But I
Mhm.
think, like, that's something that you basically, I'm gonna go back to what you said. So you
Mhm.
basically told us that the geology, while it was a great major, it wasn't necessarily a great career. Like, it didn't
Yeah.
directly translate to a great career. And I think that's something that we like to highlight on this podcast. I always say, whenever I mentor like college students, I'll tell them, like, your major is not always your career, and that's okay. Like, your
Yep.
major is not always gonna be your career. It's funny because I literally went to church too, way back in the day, and somebody told me like, "Oh, what you study is not what you're gonna do," and I didn't understand what he was saying once again. But
Mhm.
I'm doing something that, while tangentially related to what I studied, isn't the ideal job for what I studied. I studied economics, so that's like being a banker. I'm not doing that. So
Mhm.
I think like we have to realize that we might study one thing and like that might be good for us in that season, but you were able to understand like what's really good for me is something that I is a job of my own choosing, is a job that I think fits me. You talked about being a girly girl, so like fits my personality, fits who I am, and that you went into chemical. You went into the chemical plant situation,
Mhm.
and that was something that also gave you a lot. It seems like you learned a lot, you did a lot, but then there was this values driven part. So it's like this part of like, my values just don't align. And I think that
Mhm.
also is something that we have to look out for when we choose careers. I remember I was in college and I asked a peer of mine like why she was working in this particular firm. And she was just basically saying, well, the money's good, things are going well. But I was like, you know what? Like, do you ever think about if your values align? And she's like, oh, well, no one's ever asked me that. And I
Mhm.
think it's great that I'm assuming like in your 20s at that time, like had that direction and understanding to know this is just not me. This is not my values. This is not what works for me. And I think a lot of people, we can blame it on capitalism. Maybe we can. But a lot of people just think that a career is like, a career is to get a check. A
Mhm.
job is to get a check, and that values don't matter, and that what I think about a career or how I feel in that career doesn't matter. But then you took it as spirituality. Like
Yeah.
you were like, man, screw this. I'm going to the whole other side. So you went to yoga instruction. And
Mhm.
then you were like, this yoga instructor life, like this is the life that I really feel like grounds me. But yoga instruction, it gave you a lot of like, you have to learn this, you have to learn that. And you're like
Mhm.
me, like you're a DIY founder. That's how I am. Like I want
Yeah.
to do everything, or I want to bring on a friend who can do certain things. But I also like to learn from those who do the things. It's like, hey, how did you do that? How did you? I'm always curious. So through that curiosity, you ended up doing digital marketing. So I have a like a major like burning question for you.
Yeah.
So I think like, do you ever look back on these careers and you're like, what is the number one takeaway from each career? Like if you could take away something from each career, what was it for you?
Yeah. So I would definitely, if I had to do it again, I would. I would do every single one of them because I learned so much from every single one of them. From geology, I learned how to do the scientific method. It was phenomenal. I still use it to this day. How to be curious, how to figure out a hypothesis, how to do the theory, like how to do all of the different testing. From environmental health and safety, which was with the chemical manufacturer, I learned how to do the ISO standard, which is how to do version history, how to build systems, how to do all of these different things here. Without doing that ISO information, the quality management system, I would not know how to build a company at all. I feel like a lot of people sleep on figuring out how to build processes for their business. I learned that from doing environmental health and safety. From yoga, I learned, and this is the best part, I infuse it every single time when I speak with my clients, how to
Mhm.
really be empathetic with people, right? So, how to actually listen, how to ground people when they're having all of these different types of emotions around their business and be like, hey, friend, it's okay. Here, let's do some
Mhm.
breathing techniques, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody don't have access to therapy. So let me help
Mm.
you, with a few boundaries, and let me help you with a few therapy techniques too, because essentially that's what yoga is. It's helping you align your different chakras and stuff as you are going through all of this different stuff. So even with software development, learning the different processes on how to launch. So all of those different things help me to be the best digital marketer with building the company, right? And then learning how to be a leader throughout the different types, because all of the positions I had, I was a leader throughout all of the positions. So it's been a phenomenal journey, and I would not take it back for anything because I learned a lot. I mean, it was a lot of tears, but I learned a lot.
I can only imagine, like, it's a lot of tears, it's a lot of uncertainty. It's a lot of like, is this next phase going to give me what the last phase gave me or more? Sometimes we're looking for more. I would say, like, sometimes you're looking to expand.
Mhm.
Are you really going to find that expansion there? But I think you're pointing to something that I always believe is that you end up where you're supposed to be. And I think a lot of the time we spend our time, and I'm deep in like, that spirituality thing. if taken too far, we can overthink a lot of things. And sometimes I find myself overthinking, am I in the right place? I spent my first year as an entrepreneur asking myself, is this for me? And it's like, dang, I feel it in every fiber of my body that it is, but my mind hadn't caught up to it, right? My mind didn't catch up to it yet. So my mind was struggling to reconcile my new reality as someone who, I guess probably similar to you, was raised to think the job is the thing, or, like this is the thing that we do, and this is the thing that gets us to where we need to go. So you were able to kind of like, I would say, like shed new skin with
Hmm.
each job,
Every time.
and begin to like see yourself in different places and different positions. And I think that's wonderful. But also the lessons that you've extracted from them, powerful, and it all pointed towards what you do today as a digital marketer. It pointed towards that. And it's like I say, I told somebody, like somebody told me the other day, like they feel like they missed out on their dream career. You didn't miss out. You
Hmm.
did miss out on it. And the fact that you still think about it lets me know it is down there on the inside of you. Figure out how you can get from where you are to where you want to be. And I think you might not have always had, did you always have a clear direction of like digital marketing, or was it just like experimentation along the way?
It's always been experimentation. So sometimes I wake up and I'm like, let's try this new thing. So I definitely listen to what's going on in my body. That's what
Mm,
my direction is. What's happening in my body? Do we need to pivot? Do we need to add this? Do we need to take this away? Did I meditate? Did I brush my teeth today? What's going on with
mm,
me? What's going on with, the people that I'm working with? How do we need to change? That is my North Star. That is how I do things. Because if I'm not right, nothing else is right. I got to put on my, the mask they tell you in the airplane. I got to do this first. If I can't do that
yeah.
first, we out of here.
Yeah. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Ah, I feel that.
Yeah.
I feel that like there's that book like The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh,
Well, the
yep.
body doesn't just keep the score of pain, the body keeps the score of everything.
Hmm.
And I think when we tune into our bodies, I remember I was in college and a professor told me about a book about thinking beyond the brain. When we tune into our bodies and our intuition, that's exactly when we will know what choices to make. And in the Christian faith, we say like follow the spirit. Yeah, follow the spirit. And I
Hmm.
think that's so important. And it must have been, I'm hearing a lot of things. I'm hearing scientific method, but I'm also hearing intuition. And I
Yep.
think your ability to balance both, like heart and mind, I would say that is marketing, right? Because there's this mental part. There's this part of like, oh, I need to place this ad here or do this there or make sure that we target and segment. There's this mental part to marketing. There's this very strategic part.
Hmm.
But there's also this emotional part. There's
Yep.
also this like brand building, cultivating, coalition building, fan building. I always say like companies today need fans. You need fans to stand out. You need people
Hmm.
who are a fan of what you do. So I think like what you're talking about is blending that left and right hemisphere, which is really interesting. And it points towards you having like that competitive advantage, like that secret sauce for what you're doing through all these experiences. So yes, if y'all are listening, experimentation provides inspiration.
Yep.
So don't be afraid to jump when you feel uncomfortable. And like Krista said, register that in the body. And that must be a yoga principle, right? Like checking in with the body.
Yes, it is. It really is. Checking in with your body, grounding from your toes all the way up to the top of your head, grounding.
Okay. Let me
Mhm.
tell you. We need a part two for that. We need a part two. So I want to get into building the business very quickly.
Hmm.
So what do you think? Because you have this business and you're in digital marketing, you're in this space, and a lot of people want to be in this space. Like there's so many people who every other day I see somebody, because especially Gen Z. I'm a Gen Zer. Gen Z grew up on social media. Gen Z grew up marketing themselves all the time. You talked about like millennial life, like being on Black Planet in MySpace. Well, Gen Z has a very similar experience of like growing up on the internet and like always having that fascination. So every other day I hear someone say, I want to be a digital marketer or I want to have a digital marketing company. But I always ask myself, like it's such a saturated market, like what does it really take to be successful? What does it really take to stand out? So I want to know like in building, Christa Stephens Co, like your digital marketing company, like what were the biggest hurdles or challenges that you faced to overcome in building the business and establishing that marketing company successfully?
Thinking through processes. That
Mm.
was the hardest part. So actually sitting down by myself, thinking through a process. So if this happens, what will I do? How am I going to say no? That part there, setting clear boundaries.
Mm.
Those were the hardest part. So not so much getting the first client because there's all of these different tools, there's AI, all of those different things. If you set up something that looks really pretty, you could get your first client, right? You if you put it on LinkedIn, if you do all of those different things and make it look pretty enough, do a good target market campaign, you could get your first client. But saying no, that is the hardest part. What are you going to do when somebody comes up to you at 12 o'clock in the morning and you don't have your processes set up correct? And you're like, hey, I got $20 to make a logo. And you may not have, all of your different processes set up. What are your boundaries around that? Are you going to keep doing logos for $20? Is that going to be your price point? Are you gonna who are you gonna work with? Are you gonna work with people who are not in alignment with what you want to do with your life? So saying no, finding out different ways to say no, right? Figuring out exactly who you want to be in your business, figuring out who you want to employ. Do you want to do contractors? Like all of those different things. That is the hardest part. So figuring out that, once you do that, that's okay. So yeah, I would say that's the scariest part too, because boundaries are hard for me still, even at my big age.
No, let me tell
So
you, I'll be feeling like I'm Cruella de Vil when I enforce boundaries. And I have moments. I literally had a moment the other day where I was asking somebody, he's like, "Am I mean?" And I'm like, "No, you're not mean. You're just firm when you stand in something." And I think that's what we all have to learn, like to be firm when we stand in things. You're speaking facts. Like number
Mhm,
one, building a business on a whole is not easy. But I think, like you said, like you knew what your talents were. You knew your talents were on the design, the branding, the aesthetic side, the marketing side, in terms of what people see. But there's processes behind the scenes, and the more people you bring on the team, the more complexity happens. So you
mhm,
really have to make sure that you're firm and you're grounded in what you're doing. One of the things that I told somebody today is that I kept on saying, I want interns, but I didn't have the systems for interns. It
mhm,
was when I went, humbled myself, studied project management, then I learned how to build the systems for the interns. So I think there's this thing of constantly having to operationally reevaluate and readjust based on feedback and data that you're getting. And I think a lot of us aren't prepared for that. So, like, you're right, like clients coming in, people need work.
mhm.
People do need marketing work. Like they need people to help them with marketing. Like as a founder, when you're first starting out, marketing, it seems easy, but it's actually super hard when you get
It
into the
is.
nitty gritty of it. Just completed the Google Digital Marketing Certificate, so I know there's a lot
Woo!
that goes into it.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it. And I studied marketing in college too, and I never thought like on this level it's very granular. So there's a lot that goes into it, and I think it can be overwhelming. But like you said, there's a couple things you can do as a founder. Number one, you can set your price and stand in it.
Mhm,
I'm tired of hearing about specifically Black founders settling. Come on now. Set
mhm,
your price and stand in it. Have an abundance mindset, like you said, that helps you to attract clients. Know that you will attract clients.
mhm.
But you also said say no, like understand what your boundaries are. So it's this thing of like, I want to attract people, I want to bring people in, but I understand everyone might not be aligned with me. And I need to be okay with that. They might not be aligned with the price. They might not be aligned with the things I want them to the things I want or the things they want me to do for them for a specific amount. That's why we negotiate, right? So I think that there's a lot of things that you're talking about, like operations, negotiation systems, these being the things that on the back end founders will struggle with and not gain help for, right? So
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, let me know what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So I speak with clients often and they're like, hey, I want this done in 2 days. And I'm like, okay, but do you have the system to support that once you get 100 clients for that friend? Oh, no, I didn't even think. Come
Mm.
on. Let's get some stuff going so that you can support that. Because I see where you're going. You're about to make $1 million. Do you got the systems in place to make $1 million? Are you ready for that? Are you emotionally ready for it? Okay. So it's a lot to go into it, a lot. So, definitely defining boundaries, defining what you want for your life, defining what success means for you. Hmm.
Yeah. All right, Krista. Our hot hour is up. I think we need a part two. I think we need a part two. We will connect and see if you're interested in that. But thank
Hmm.
you so much for this conversation. This was just the icing on the cake. This is what I needed. I needed that, especially what you're talking about, like the building systems and preparing for what you want. That is like for me, that's like the 2024 intention. Prepare for what you want and start preparing actively for what you want, because oftentimes God is waiting for you to build before you receive it. I literally had a revelation about a book that I want to write about building in faith, and how a lot of the time we expect our journeys to look linear, but God is waiting on us to start. He's waiting on us to build the capacity before we receive. So I think that's that word that I needed today. So thank you so much for this episode. I think this is going to be so impactful. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and sharing yourself. And one last thing we like to do before we close out, I want you to finish this sentence for me. I am a purposeful professional because,
I am creative. Yes.
yeah,
Hmm.
and we create our own reality
There you
every
go.
day. All right. Thank you, Krista. Take care.
Thank
All right.
you.
Bye.
Bye.